I really appreciate this program being here, and wish something it was around when I was younger. I think it's sort of actually giving the opportunity for autistic people to empower themselves and take the steps forward is a dramatic step forward.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of Working to Work, a neurodivergent journey through employment. I'm Sam, your host, and I'm happy to be back with another full episode. I know it's taken a while since the Robert Buckland episode at the beginning of September to come with a new episode, but hopefully some of you have seen the shorter feature that I released that speaks to some of the challenges that a few neurodivergent individuals I spoke with mentioned in terms of obtaining and maintaining employment. And for those that didn't see it, it's also going to be a part of this episode. And that's because the interview that I had planned as the main feature of this episode, which it still fundamentally is, was cut short. And that is because of the importance of the job and the need to address issues as and when they come up. So hopefully I've teased a little bit, got you kind of slightly curious about what is this profession, what is this job that requires one to kind of break away from such an amazing experience as being interviewed on Working to Work. This episode is about job coaching. So I spoke with Leo Capella, who is a job coach at the National Autistic Society, and Leo works with autistic people to support them obtaining and maintaining work. So why am I interested in this? Well, I think from my perspective and also my conversations and interactions with other neurodivergent individuals, sometimes the challenge of finding work is around context, is around having someone that can support in understanding what's being asked, how these procedures work, and being able to communicate with someone that is able to understand the unique challenges and concerns that a neurodivergent individual might experience when seeking work. I was also curious what the key skills were for an autistic job coach. So Leo defined the work as an interesting study in human diversity. What I liked about what Leo's saying there in terms of human diversity, it's about recognizing, hey, forget the labels of neurotypical employer, employee, autistic, neurodivergent. He seemed to be speaking to, I have this skill to be able to interpret what someone needs, what different parties needs, how to kind of appease them and bring them to a place where they can find harmony and get the best out of each other. So that's an interesting aspect of that work that Leo will speak to. There's also, unfortunately, some things that I really wanted to find out that I couldn't because the interview was so short. But we spoke to potentially doing a follow-up, so maybe we'll do that. Quick thing I actually wanted to add, I'm really sorry about the audio quality in this interview, particularly on my side. Oh, and I'm not sure I actually mentioned this. I teased this at the beginning, but the reason I couldn't record to the full extent was Leo was delayed at the start due to pressing work, and then halfway through us recording had to stop due to kind of something that had to be addressed at that moment in relation to the job coaching work that he does. So that was a tease at the beginning, which I don't think I actually circled back around to finish that point. I don't think anyone was probably hanging on the edge of their seat wondering wait, how does that connect with what you said at the beginning? But if you were, now you know. Hello and welcome to the second episode of Working to Work, a neurodivergent journey into employment. I'm really pleased to be joined by Leo Capella for this episode, who is a job coach at the National Autistic Society. And when I was thinking about how I should introduce this episode, I was thinking the host commonly says, "I'm really pleased, I'm thrilled to be joined by." And I'm just wondering if there's ever an instance where the host is like, "Oh, I'm reluctantly joined by this person." Like it never really happens. So I find it a curious way to introduce people. But I am thrilled to be joined by Leo because for this episode, I really want to dive into what a job coach does, and specifically in terms of supporting autistic people with obtaining and maintaining employment. So I wanted to start by asking Leo whether you'd be willing to introduce yourself, what you do, what the role is, and also like how you came to the role.
Okay, I'm Leo Capella. I'm a job coach at the National Autistic Society. I've been working on it for nearly four active years. I sort of, some people could say, technically over 4 years, but actually I really started it in January 2020. I came to it after being the autism access specialist for the National Autistic Society. It was sort of, I had a good year there covering for about, in fact, 10 months or so, covering for another person, and it was time to sort of move on. So I've been dealing with the sort of interesting study in human diversity that this job has been.
What do you think are the kind of key skills that a job coach needs, and specifically a job coach supporting autistic people?
Oh, I think it's about um, having good listening skills, for one thing, being able to problem solve, which I do half the time, and also being able to adjust. And actually, given a lot of my job is partly training, it's being a good trainer and instructor, and actually managing to be a good relay where need be. Because what I am effectively is a bridge between an employer and autistic employees who come on to our program. To give you an idea, there's a jobs board on the National Autistic Society for Autism at Work, which uh, people apply for roles for. If they get them, they sort of will actually get some pre-employment training, and then actually what I will also do is train the employer so that they understand the autistic person that's coming in, and then I will either have catch-ups with actually with the employer or the candidate, the person, the autistic person who's got the job, or both of them, to make sure that everyone's settling in sustainably. Normally, for a fixed window of 6 months, dare I say it, that's the way it's normally supposed to work. Sometimes and can be exceptions, but that's to give you, that is the general idea of it. So I'd say it's also part of my work is being able to champion autistic talent. So actually, it's sort of, how to put it, being able uh, to champion when the opportunity arises. And I'd say otherwise, it's also being at risk of turning this into a scattergun answer, knowing me, but it's being a good communicator and knowing how to draw, dare I say it, draw out information from other people as well as understanding other people and employers who, like I said, this job coaching is a study in diversity, and for better or worse, the people I deal with and employers are a good study in diversity, and I mean that in the best possible way.
You mentioned problem solving, and I want to move on to that a bit later, if that's all right. Just in terms of like what some of those problems that you have to solve or seek to solve are. But just in terms of the practicalities of working with you, you mentioned that candidates apply for the jobs on the website. Is the order of things that they will apply, and if they're applying, then they will be offered job coaching, or does someone come to the National Autistic Society and say, I feel I would benefit from a job coach, and then you help guide them to the different roles that are potentially available as part of the Autism at Work program? I think essentially, like, at what point does one gain access to a job coach, and what are the criteria that need to be met to be offered that support?
Put it this way, the thing I want to say about job coaching generally, it's a diverse profession, and different programs across different organisations and charities work differently. So what I'm describing is one process rather than in the sort of the standard for all processes. What we are trying to do with the National Autistic Society is actually our sort of job coaching process is that we really want autistic people to take the initiative and apply for positions where they can, because what we don't accept is people sort of referring themselves. We're sort of I think the term is candidate recruitment or candidate hiring agency that sort of act in a way that candidates apply apply for the position that employers provide from us, ranging from fully paid positions to workplace to work experience, but we are looking for paid opportunities, and that and really once they are selected by the employer, that we work with them. I think it sort of means that actually the employers on board. It also encourages candidates to take the steps forward that they need. And there are other schemes and strands, but this is the main strand to it that really actually is the one that we really push for in our team, in my team, the employment team at the National Autistic Society.
So, could an autistic person apply for a job that they're interested in that isn't listed on the website and then seek support, or is the support only available for the roles that the National Autistic Society are kind of advertising that they've been in contact with that employer, and that employer is open to that kind of support from you? Does that make
For
sense?
Yeah, right, that makes sense. I think the rules are uh, only as it is. The rules uh, are only open to uh, the thing we would support with are the sort of, dare I say it, the roles that people apply for on our website. Occasionally, we do get employers coming to us or that kind of thing, but it is really, as a rule, that is the case. So I hope that's clear.
Yep, that is clear. So my understanding is the program now that you're speaking about is called Autism at Work, but prior to that, the National Autistic Society had a different way of supporting autistic individuals with employment, which was more of a kind of bespoke coach working with that person and looking at what is available. What, first of all, I guess, is that, am I right in thinking that? And then also, why then the shift to the model that exists now with Autism to Work, which is different?
From my understanding, there were various reasons, and I used to be a service user from the Prospects program, but that happened before I joined the. Uh, that happened, and I'm trying to think of the right way to describe this. I've had two stints at the National Autistic Society, and that happened a long time ago. That's the best answer I can give you. I think one of the reasons was is that we needed employers to sort of buy in to the actual program and provide the opportunities. And also there has been a shift. Prospect was at the dawn of the employment challenges being recognised. And actually, with employers on board and providing positions and actually looking to hire autistic people, looking to hire neurodivergent people more widely, that was a sort of that was key, I think, in sort of resurrecting not resurrecting, but actually creating something of a successor in a, it has to be emphasized, a different way instead of just sort of going from helping people to look for work to actually providing positions for people to get jobs from.
That makes a lot of sense because I can imagine, and I wasn't a service user, so I can't say from experience, but there might be challenges for both the individual and the job coach in the old model, which, just for clarity for anyone listening, I think Prospect or Prospects was the name of that program. If with all the goodwill in the world from the individual and the job coach, if the company or organization or employer isn't aligned and isn't kind of open to or kind of infused or aware of the value of this individual and what they can bring and how what adjustments could be made, it would be kind of potentially hitting one's head against a brick wall trying to support them. And if you have more of a synergy between the individual, the employer, and then the job coach in terms of what one's looking to achieve or what the three are looking to achieve, it's potentially more. There's a more higher success rate in terms of like finding gratifying employment.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a fair assessment, maybe of potentially like why this evolution happened?
Yeah, there were a reason which I won't go into, but but as I think you're right about the evolution happening and why we were able to create another program in employment. We have put it this way, we do train employers through our training and consultancy program, but this is much more intensive, and it means that actually employers can and do come through our program, and so do autistic people. And we have the case studies on our website to sort of prove that, so to speak.
I was going to ask, like, how do you kind of quantify whether this is successful or not? Like, or how do you feel in terms of like the as someone very much involved in it, it's going like do you feel like it's working as is at the moment?
As a line animal, I'm not going to go into the statistics into that, but I am going to say that actually we are holding our own. And I think that actually the fact is that we've been able to work with some good people, um, with some employers, let's say, like how to put it, HMRC, for instance, like Cube Links, and really that was we've we've been managing to keep on appealing to employers that they want to put job opportunities up on our jobs board. So um, I can say it's safe to say in the weird and wonderful economic times that we're in, we're uh, we're doing what we can.
Yeah, I know. I was going to ask actually, how is it that organizations or employers get involved? Is it you reaching out to them, and if so, how do you identify which employers that you think might be uh, receptive to working in this program, or is it employers coming to you saying, "We want to hire autistic, we want to hire neurodivergent talent. Can you support us in doing that?" Or maybe a combination of both.
Combination of the both. I actually don't do that work, sometimes contribute to it. But we have two employment engagement managers. And actually, one of whom I think can be found talking on the second episode of our Spectrum Live 2 Facebook podcast, our Spectrum Live program. And sort of really what they do is they go out looking for employers to work with, respond to employers to sort of who come and inquire with us, and we do safe to say we do our own. Sometimes I get to chip in on various efforts to attract employers too. So really, it's sort of a combination, and it's a combination of them both.
Do you notice it becoming easier in a sense? I feel like in the current zeitgeist, there's more of a conversation about neurodivergent people, more of a conversation about the first of all the autistic kind of employment gap, but also the kind of the value of having a diverse workforce. Is it becoming easier, you think, to build those relationships than it was maybe when you first started?
This is the thing about it. I think I can't say whether it's becoming easier, but I do note the zeitgeist. I think that
Mm.
actually employers are having conversations. It's safe to say there is a steady stream, as you yourself noted, Sam, about the news of what's going on in terms of actually people cropping up in different places, both late diagnosed and their idea at early diagnosed. We have the sort of case studies from Stories on the Spectrum on the website of professionals, including their idea people like uh, retired Vice Admiral Nick Hine, who are coming out, and it is that sort of how to just trying to find the word. It is we are seeing this stream of stories acting, which is day to day as a bit of a tailwind, pushing things forward for autistic people and neurodivergent ones more generally. That's not to say that challenges don't exist, they do, and it sort of really that is the sort of thing to be worked on, but it is for all the sort of stuff and for all the sometimes feeling that progress can be feeling that sometimes progress can be and is a bit slow in certain areas, things are creeping forward too.
That's positive to hear. In preparation for this interview, I was, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I watched both the Spectrum Live episodes on the National Autistic Society's Facebook page, which were highly relatable, and just in a comforting sense, I would offer that anyone has experienced challenges relating to obtaining work in particular, check them out. Within that, there was a short package or kind of feature about a kind of neurodivergent autistic experience in interviewing, and how that potentially feels, and why it's challenging in terms of like how open to be, how open one should be, the challenges in terms of like knowing how much context to give when given quite an open-ended question.
Okay, hello again, Sam, breaking in from the interview to let you know now I'm going to play the clip that I just mentioned in the interview. For those listening on Resonance or the podcast feed, you won't be able to see some of the titles, so I'll just read what's said on the screen so you have a sense.
Is it Stephen? Please, follow me.
Congrats on all the awards. So, tell me about yourself.
Do I say everything?
So, what would you say your strengths and weaknesses are?
Should I be honest?
Really? You don't look it.
She's looking for it. Should I not have told her?
Just so you know, the role has changed ever so slightly, but it's nothing major.
But I need time to prepare.
Let's find out a bit about you. So what experience do you have? What skills, what abilities?
Too many questions. Please ask them separately.
Anything?
Need time to think.
It doesn't seem like you've had a job for a few months.
6 months.
A year. Why is that?
Okay.
Out of time. I failed.
It's nice to meet you.
Thanks for coming in.
We'll be in touch.
Are you okay?
I'm not unemployable. I'm autistic. And sometimes I get too much information.
And also, it was quite moving to hear one participant talk about them being told they were being unprofessional, and that really being more about kind of not anything that they've done that was inverted commas wrong, just the way they communicate not being what one expects. So I thought that, and I liked that it was kind of pitched as this is one experience, but I think there's many people can relate to. So I just wanted to mention that for anyone that might be interested in watching a really well produced video, and yeah, thanks for making that as a representative of the organisation. But to lead on to a question, you mentioned that you were once a service user of Prospects. So I wonder, like from your experience, what when you started working with them, did you feel that you needed or wanted support with, or what did they offer support with that that was a barrier for employment from your
I think
perspective?
they helped me look for work and they sort of provided training. I think, though, that I would say with this current program, it's I basically fell into the trap of having a lot of volunteering experience, including from student union and sort of disability charity sort of activism, and not enough paid experience. And in the end, I got found my first job through what was then the Future Job Fund. But what I would say is, I really appreciate this program being here, and wish something it was around when I was younger. I think it's sort of actually giving the opportunity for autistic people to empower themselves and take the steps forward is a dramatic step forward, because that way it sort of actually really it sort of gives that independence. It means that actually if you find something that fits for you, then that's okay. What can what can happen is that actually, and I won't comment on specific, but it is safe to say, I can see that in the enthusiasm reflected in the in the candidates for the most part who do come there and actually apply for our positions. So
I don't want. Sorry, go ahead.
go on.
I don't want to press too much on your experiences, but maybe I can speak to the experiences that I found highly relatable in that short video that was part of the Spectrum line. So, for instance, kind of being asked like quite open-ended questions, being asked a lot of questions, not knowing how much to disclose, how honest to be when kind of one's default position is to kind of answer questions as truthfully and kind of accurately as possible. I think there's, or at least I have a feeling that there is a kind of a way that these are meant to job interviews are kind of the applicant is supposed to behave in that doesn't necessarily come intuitively to some, and it can be like quite a difficult experience, especially when one believes that they have the capability to do it, but just that the way that they communicate is not received by the potential employer, in a way that allows them to get that opportunity. I hear you saying that you're really in favor of empowering autistic and neurodivergent employees to kind of find their own way in this. Something I think blocking that is a sense of agency in those situations. So, for example, like since in the last few years, I've been thinking about if I were in a job interview and I was asked a question, I would maybe like be more comfortable now asking like, well, could you clarify by what you mean by such and such, or asking like, let me have a moment to think about that, or in advance asking for questions so that one can consider it, because unless the work is being like having instant responses to things, which is, I don't know what job that would be, I imagine they exist but not the majority of jobs, then being able to instantly respond with a kind of pitch perfect answer isn't a necessary skill. So like I wonder like whether you think there's more that employers can do to make people feel comfortable that to ask for what they need in those scenarios, because even sometimes if one has an awareness of or a diagnosis, disclosing that doesn't necessarily afford them those it doesn't change the scenario unless like they're able to advocate for what specifically that means in this scenario, for instance, an interviewing scenario. So I'm trying to think, there is a question here. I guess the question is, how might the work that you do be applied in a broader way that kind of can impact and affect change for more people than just the National Autistic Society and the job coaches there can provide? Because you're one person, I imagine you have colleagues, but it's a limited amount of people. Like, do you take that knowledge and offer it in to employers in general? And I wonder, this is a very rambling question, sorry, but maybe speaking of the government's review at the moment, maybe I wonder if that's potentially how you could systemically, what you do can impact on a greater scale by giving feedback on what can be changed. Sorry, quite rambly, but hopefully you get a sense what I mean.
Lots of different strands to that question, in all honesty.
I know that was not a good question. A question I think
No,
I'd want
it's
to be
a
asked.
fair question, but there is limit to what I can answer it. The first thing I would say is, I do know National Autistic Society provided evidence to the feedback to the Buckland Review. It's there. It's sort of around it. Good to see the government actually taking something forward, but we will just have to see its outcome and what it actually leads to.
Okay, we're back. I want to thank Leo for giving the time that he did to this interview. As I say, had to be cut short, got a call, and needed to be dressed in that moment. But as I say, would like to potentially follow up with Leo in future because there were some outstanding questions that I would really hope to get to. I thought I'd just mention what those are. I was curious about the specifics of, if Leo wished to share, about what challenges he potentially experienced obtaining and maintaining work, and in particular how those influence and inform the work that he does supporting others. I was also curious in terms of how job coaching could support those without a knowledge of the existence of job coaches. So for instance, I had no sense that there was this role existed or what they potentially could offer. And I was also curious how job coaching might support those without access to it. So the way Leo spoke about what the National Autistic Society are doing was that, it's relatively limited. They have limited resources and limited job opportunities, because from what I understand is the opportunities that they're willing to support are those that are listed on their website. So there is an aspect of empowerment in that the individual is encouraged to apply and themselves and do that kind of legwork, but it doesn't kind of necessarily support those who are seeking opportunities that with organisations or employers that are not involved in this Autism to Work programme. And I get that to an extent. Leo made the point well that there needs to be a buy-in from both parties, so the employer being willing to be supported and recognising the value of individuals and their skills and different modes of communication. And I imagine it's challenging for any coach to support an individual and support an organisation if the organisation is not doesn't have the will, so to speak, or the understanding. I guess what would be great in that sense is if there were more organisations that did have that will, did have that recognition of the talent and that the passing up potentially to mean that there's more opportunities that the National Autistic Society and other organisations can work with and support people into employment. But fundamentally, I feel that not everyone that potentially needs a job coach can get a job coach. They may not have a diagnosis that potentially allows them to access that. And again, even if they do and they have that awareness of this would help, there's finite resources. And some of these, some of the work that it seems like job coaches do, I would hope in the future would ultimately be integrated into the general kind of world of work. So the kind of hiring practices and the then workplace practices, which would negate the need for individuals to have job coaches unless there was more specific challenges that couldn't be just accommodated by rethinking how that process works. So yeah, I wonder whether there's an aspect of job coaching that is not just supporting that individual, but through supporting that individual, ultimately has a greater impact where the company and organisations that the job coach works with gain that knowledge and understanding of different individuals' needs and sensibilities and challenges and strengths as well, and down the line doesn't necessarily need to utilise a job coach to that extent, because they have that awareness and recognition of what helps and the value of all potential employees and differing needs and ways that one can express what they can do and why, and creating environments that are conducive to that individual feeling able to demonstrate why they're good for that particular job.
My name is Carrie. I am autistic. I work in audio production.
My name is Brent Belinsky. I am a publisher / contract copywriter, and I have ADHD, and I believe I probably have dyslexia, though that's not been diagnosed. I just haven't gotten around to that. But I misread words a lot, and it takes a lot of mental effort.
My name's Oluwase. I'm dyspraxic. I work in audio production.
I'm Sian, and I most likely have ADHD, and I've been diagnosed with a specific learning disorder.
I'm currently looking for work right now, but it's been proving very hard to find another job because applying for jobs requires a lot of mental energy. What I find most difficult is probably writing a cover letter. My brain can't really communicate itself very well through writing, especially through a formal / academic way. I think what really frustrates me the most about the process is that I know I'm a much better communicator verbally, but they require you to do it in writing first before you even get to the interview stage, which is really disheartening. Some of their website interfaces just really don't sit well with me. Like, for example, you have to say the job title, the place you worked at, and then the dates you worked in, and then the responsibilities. Whereas if I just sent you my CV, you would get all of that information. So it does nothing except take away more mental energy that I could have used elsewhere.
I get very nervous in interviews. The way that my brain works is I listen and I read, especially like each individual word by itself rather than kind of gleaning, which most people do. And so I struggle to really answer questions looking at the wider picture. I remember in my last interview, actually, I was asked conflict management. Can you give me an example of and I got just so focused on them expanding on what exactly they meant by conflict, in this situation. They said that was partly the reason I didn't get that job, actually thinking about it. I feel like with interviewing, I've always struggled to express myself fully. And I think that can be really hard in a high pressurized interviewing situation. Language is perhaps privileged, because if you're in an interview space and you have 5 minutes to demonstrate that you're good at a job or a project that you're going to spend months thinking about, having it condensed and then having to use language. A few years ago, I just didn't have the kind of vocabulary and the range to be able to express myself. And then my memory just wasn't good enough for recalling these things, especially when I get quite anxious. It maybe would be nice to prepare something in advance.
So bad, had a dream that I sat before whimpering. I tried to loosen my mask, but you're tighter, you're faster, as craven as sad. I feel so bad.
When I think about organisational culture, despite there being this focus on diversity, there is some discrepancy when it comes to details of what difference means, not just who we are or how we identify, and that being a marker of difference, but also how people behave or think slightly differently.
Conform and contour is the name of this war. Watch their faces distort with these genuine thought. They revise what they're feeling and cease the appeasing. As craven as sad when I feel so bad.
Also, an environment that encourages people to question as well is important, and sometimes that's not always there. In terms of an organisation and the culture, I feel like sometimes people work in an environment where it's very kind of ad hoc and free, and that they can work quickly. But sometimes for me to really engage with something, I really have to understand each different component and where it fits in the kind of broader context of maybe a story I'm telling or a show I'm making. So yeah, just kind of clear kind of ideas and clear structure, and just kind of knowing all the different steps. I do fear when I bring that up that someone will just say, or, you're making excuses, which I've had when I was a teacher. I had an incident where they completely changed the layout of a classroom and give me a whole new classes to teach. And I just told them it was, I have to really kind of spend time kind of in this new environment, and also kind of learning the names of this new class. It's going to take me a bit longer. And I said, because I'm dyspraxic. And they said, you're making excuses. I suppose that has made me slightly hesitant to tell them about my neurodiverse status.
I definitely struggled to communicate in many, many ways, but mainly because of my lack of ability to quickly get the words I'm trying to find. And that just creates a lot of issues, a lot of anxiety in the workspace, not only talking to people in positions of power that you need to be answering to, but definitely in social spaces, which is so important.
In terms of communication, sometimes I feel like I say the wrong thing, and I think some people may see that as me being rude, and sometimes it's hard to say that actually it's not me being like that. It's just, sometimes I can kind of miss how you're meant to kind of respond or be in a certain situation, especially in a workplace which has its sort of rules and regulations. And if I'm honest, it kind of took me a while to kind of understand the code and kind of how to act.
I've been misunderstood so much in work environments, all environments. It's still difficult, and so I don't want to kind of solely blame it on neurological differences, but I definitely have recognised I have often been just generally painted as lacking, I think, in certain areas because I just won't understand something or I won't remember a task.
I sometimes worry in terms of misunderstanding at work just because it takes me sometimes a bit longer to kind of get something, or I might make errors which might seem fairly obvious to someone who's neurotypical. It's sort of around attention to detail, and I feel like sometimes that can give the impression that I'm maybe lazy or I'm not giving my all. I fear that the person who employs me or my boss thinks that I'm just not trying hard enough or just being lazy.
I work alone, and I generally work alone, and I'm happy with that. I get easily distracted, including by people I like being around and to have things to say that I want to listen to. I don't work alone because I dislike the company of people. I think they're dandy, and for mental health reasons like to check in at a co-working space and be around folks once a week on average.
Meetings I definitely struggle with because of the condensed environment to which you're meant to talk about stuff. You know, when you're in an environment where like you have to meet an agenda within a certain space and around certain people who are maybe a little bit different, I like to be able to kind of really, really think what I'm going to say and maybe just write it down and have like my thoughts and ideas being able to be expressed that way in a way that I've had the ability to give myself time to put it down into words without having to kind of like suddenly I'm there and then speak it all out.
I kind of need to know what everyone's kind of their role is, and I like to be able to bounce off someone else. Sometimes I kind of get stuck in my own head and I start worrying if my ideas are any good, and all I need is just someone that I can, you know, maybe pick up a phone to or talk to, who will be able to sort of acknowledge that and see that it's me just trying to understand or process something.
I haven't found any social structures in place that make me feel more accepted and kind of accommodate for the issues that I face in those environments. But individually, I just go home and I have to revise stuff and it feels really lame. But now I'm just like, I have to do stuff that makes me feel comfortable in the workplace when I get there and not kind of anxious.
ADHD has always taken more work to get work done. And so I had to devise workarounds for all my writing work. Whenever I want to write something that's longer than perhaps 300, 400 words, and you know, there's the potential, given the length, for me to wander all over the shop, I'll write down like a kind of an architecture, a beginning, middle, end, points I want to cover in between, and I'll write out a little list of what I want to do. Otherwise, the thing will not really answer the question I'd set out to answer when I started writing.
Now I'm working in a theatre. People come up to me and they ask me where things are, and I never remember. So I've taken a screenshot of the layout of the whole theatre, and I've just had this attitude of like, I'm not going to apologise if it takes me 4 more minutes to get my screenshot and find the number and point you in the right direction. I think with age, I've been more kind of self-compassionate and just accepting of myself. Like, if I don't remember where something is, that's not my fault, and a problem that's not really a problem.
My dream work would be being a presenter, interviewing people. I like getting to know other people's perspectives on all manners of things, really. I just find that really fascinating, and to do that as a job would be absolutely wonderful.
Oh, that's a hard one. I think something creative, something ideas-based, and something flexible. I like working with ideas, and I like transforming those ideas into something creative.
So yeah, dream job was to be a magazine features writer. If it was still a thing that was viable, I'd love to be doing that.
The project that I'm currently doing, most people wouldn't really consider it work because it's not getting paid, but it's a creative project / job. I would call that a success because I can really see it translating into something that I can get paid for in society, but it's the very way that I'm doing it will mean that I can do something in the future that I think I really, really enjoy in a way that I want to.
And one other thing I hoped to have spoken to Leo about was how job coaching can support autistic and other neurodivergent individuals in creating their own work, so creating their own initiatives and organisations and projects that support them financially and in all aspects of one's life. How can we better support neurodivergent people to create their own mode of work, which I believe could facilitate novel organisations, new ways of doing things with. And I think it would be interesting to see the nature of those organisations. Were there more of them that have founded by neurodivergent individuals? Like, would they have different structures? Would they have some of these kind of accessibility procedures kind of embedded by default through kind of a lived understanding of what have they found challenging and what would be helpful for others? Because I think some of what we think of as accommodations really could be beneficial to everyone. I can't imagine an individual that would say, well, I'm sure there's someone that comes that says, hey, if it's really chaotic when I come into interview and I'm being asked a ton of questions and I'm never and I don't know really like what someone wants, that is the thing that kind of like gets me to be my best. So yeah, it would be interesting to talk about how we might better support neurodivergent people to create their own work and organisations. And actually in a future episode I'm going to speak with someone that has done just that. I'm really looking forward to that. That's it for this episode, the second episode of Working to Work. I hope you've enjoyed it. I appreciate you listening, watching, engaging in any way. It's such a cliche, but it's not really a cliche, it's something that's necessary to say, I think. Really appreciate you subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing, because the purpose of this project is to create awareness. And the more exposure, I think, the more change. So please do share. There's an Instagram, there's a Twitter, and there's the YouTube channel. And soon the Resonance broadcast once I have a decent amount of episodes. So please do engage. I'm doing my best to try and maintain those different platforms the best I can. But your support is very welcome, and any feedback. I've got an email address now, which is w2w, so W the letter, 2 the number, W, working to work, at kalou.co.uk, which is kalou.co.uk. Thanks a lot, and